Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lucie Lederhendler, and I'm the curator here at the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba, where we are open to the public, but we still want people to stay safe and also to be able to have access to this kind of program wherever you are. So welcome to those of you online as well. By way of introduction to Mary Anne Barkhouse and Okimaha, this exhibition that we just opened last night, I thought I could share a little memory of my own that I've been visiting a lot recently. And I think you'll see why as we delve into this exhibition. And it's the memory of the first time I ever saw a bison. The first time I ever saw a bison, I saw a herd of bison. There must have been 100 of them, and they were magnificent. But the first time that you see a bison, you see 100 bison, you need to be taught that they've been wiped out, that they need to be protected. And this is the kind of serious work that this exhibition does. It creates a space for us to see those territories filled with the things that they ought to be filled with. We will be talking a lot about Treaty 6 territory, which is the site and subject of much of this work, but it doesn't make much sense to describe the bison's land according to these documents. So I will say for my part here at the AGSM, I'm grateful to be here on the homeland of the Métis Nation, in a place that is also the shared territory of the Anishinaabe, Dene, Dakota, Oji-Cree, and Cree peoples. It is still important to honor the treaties that divide this land in the spirit in which they were enacted, lest we distance ourselves from history. So we may also call this land Treaty 2. I think you'll see as we tour the exhibition as well how important both of these perspectives are. Now I will invite Mary Anne Barkhouse to join me in the virtual world from a few meters away from me in the physical world, and we will start the tour. Mary Anne Barkhouse was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, but has ties to both coasts as her mother is from the Nimfish band Quaddle, or if you will indulge me, Kwakwakewa.
That's just good. Good job.
First Nation of Alert Bay, British Columbia. I'll get it one of these days, and it'll be a point of pride. Her father is of German and British descent from Nova Scotia. She is a descendant of a long line of internationally recognized Northwest Coast artists that include Ellen Neal, Mungo Martin, and Charlie James. She graduated with honors from Ontario College of Art in Toronto and has exhibited widely across Canada and the United States, including many public art projects, of which many of you are no doubt aware. Barkhouse's work examines ecological concerns and intersections of culture through the use of animal imagery. It's inspired by issues surrounding empire and survival and consideration of self as a key response to history and environment. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you very much, Lucie.
So I thought that the first thing that we could do is do a quick tour of the exhibition as installed.
Okay.
And then we'll go more deeply into the nuances of specific series of pieces.
Okay.
If there's anything that you would like to open with at this point, now's a good time. I will also remind everybody watching at home or on your computer that you can engage with us at any time via the comments section of your YouTube or Facebook. So in the meantime, let's get started with this virtual tour. We do have some people here in the gallery as well, and they are invited to interject. This is Okimaha when you first enter into the gallery. Do you want to tell us what we're looking at here?
Okay, when you first come into the gallery, I guess the first piece actually that you encounter in the show, it will probably be that long tapestry piece that features a little beaver that's sitting at the edge, and that one is called Tapestry 1, Truth and Reconciliation, and that is confusingly not an actual tapestry, but that piece features the entire length of the executive summary of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee work, which was released several years ago. So when that was released, I wanted to create a visual depiction of what I thought the weight of that document was, not just that document, but the entire work of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee.
So that's about that confrontation when you first walk in with the effort of that work. And this, I think, I'm taking us kind of on a walk past where you enter. And this was what happens when you walk in and look the other way. If you look to your right, when you first
so if you look to your left, you'll see that one piece, and then look to your right. There's a series of 3 actual tapestries, which depict the bison against the actual landscape of Wanuskewin, which is just outside Saskatoon in Saskatchewan. But the bison are in several sort of hypothetical situations that I've created. So the landscape, most of the photographs in those are all images that I took, although they're interjected with images from art history and so forth. So that's what you'll on the right-hand side when you come into the gallery.
Which is something that we see a lot of in your work, is that play of kind of primary source and then blending different types of objects, whether they're art historical fine art objects or toys or
exactly. So I start with sort of this one palette, and then I start mixing things in as far as to create the whatever the narrative or the story that I'm taking you on.
And quite specifically also your you focus on kind of these kind of grand estates and then a Baroque period of art.
I do, and I've used these the backdrop of domestics interiors, but specifically, I guess more the grand estates, because I was using that as a, I guess that was a crucial time. Oh, someone's coming in here.
Yeah, we have a little. Apparently, there's the chamber echo. So continue.
Okay, so anyway, that was a crucial time in Canadian history. With the advent of the fur trade and so forth. So that's why I've been going back to the time that would have been the 15, 16, early 1700s, which was the beginning of the fur trade and the repercussions that are being felt to this day, not just the fur trade, but these different economic endeavors that were going on between the nations that existed already in North America and the nations that were coming over from overseas. So Europeans, but also in British Columbia. I know here the conversation is often about Europeans, but in British Columbia, it's Russian.
Right. So, right. And I think that really ties it into the environmentalist bent of your work.
Hold on while we do have a quick break here. Well, shall I just put these all on?
You're extra
okay, because you can never have too many microphones.
It's okay. This is also why we were a little late starting to our online viewers, but hopefully now it works perfectly.
Now I've got a wealth of microphones to tell you about these grand estates. So, but these considerations, I think that's pivotal, because often it's an important part in explanation why I use these formats. Because I could use, like as you say, my background is Quaggill, and I come from a family of carvers and fishermen. But I would say, even though I work in very different materials from what they did, I don't think it's that off base or that different from what my ancestors used to do in the materials. Because one of the commonalities has always been the storytelling aspect of our artwork, and the other commonality was the curiosity to use the materials and integrate new materials. So it wasn't static, and Quaggill society, Quaggill artwork has never been static, I think. So, but looking back, sometimes there's market forces that pigeonhole certain types of cultural endeavor. So people say, "What are you doing here? How does your home community react to it?" They say, "That's Mary Anne, and she's crazy." That's great. I'm very fortunate to meet a good reception with the family and the community that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a long digression. We'll continue on the tour. So I'll let you jump in now.
This is going to be an organic conversation, I think. So this is what you encounter right after the triptych of tapestries that we saw, and then you go around a corner.
And that piece, so then you'll see it's kind of like a blue counterpart or an extension of the series that was begun with the Truth and Reconciliation. So this piece is called Tapestry 2, To Build a Better Lodge. And this has a variety of documentation in it. So while the Tapestry 1 has just that one document from the TRC, this one has several documents that have been drawn up between different nations, First Nations, as well as, I guess, the European or the Crown. So a lot of them are treaties. They're not all treaties, but I was starting with that as the basic documentation of conflict and challenge and the political will that has been going on over the past hundreds of years. And then I'm contrasting that with literal signs of Indigenous resistance from my lifetime. So that's like 6 decades. So some of the imagery that's in that piece features protest signs that would have been common to the era when AIM was more prevalent, like American Indian movement.
Yeah.
As I had family that was involved with that as well, that were living actually in Winnipeg in this area. So I'm trying to bring in a bit of the far away past and juxtapose it up with our contemporary reality, what's happening here now. And then if you had an image of
we're going to go into we're going to zoom in closely.
Okay,
at the tour, yeah. But I did also, as far as this, this is almost the most mishmashy looking of all of your things because of like this archive,
yeah, it's like a big
desk aesthetic.
Yeah, it has a real collage-y feel to it. And as I showed this work, it's very much a work in progress, and a piece that's sort of, I wouldn't say necessarily interactive, but it is in the sense that whenever I show this work, I add the documents that are relevant to that location. So when I first showed this work, I was in Treaty 6 territory. So Treaty 6 features prominently at the beginning. So while I was here, I added in the Selkirk Treaty, Treaty 2, and the map of Treaty 1 and Treaty 2. Unfortunately, Treaty 1, I was not able to get those documents. I wasn't able to get yet from the Library and Archives Canada. So
we'll see the blank space that's
right. That's to be added.
And then you turn a corner and you're confronted with these wolves, which are from 2011. Again, we'll go into more detail scenes, but this idea of them being kind of stalked in this secret room after a journey has kind of occurred.
Yes, and they're also I wanted the sensibility from going back to the idea of a chateau or a large grand mansion type of thing, where you often have images of like family portraiture over top of the mantle. And so in this case, it's like, well, if this is the family, where are they?
Yeah, and that's a good, so as a whole, the exhibition is kind of intended to create these interior residential spaces. You have a dining room and a playroom at kind of the grand entrance.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that we've spoken before about my challenges with these long skinny pieces. So we have the table and we have the tapestries, titled tapestries, and in order to make things not grid-like, I actually did have to divide it up into something like a more domestic,
like a house, which is great, and I thank you for that. Because the layout here, I think, has a really nice flow to it as far as people encountering the different installations.
They really do call for an encounter. Encourage all of our virtual friends to come down in person as well. So let's go into detail. We swung right by I-Corvid.
You've flown right by I-Corvid.
We were caught in the stream. So this is the 4 of them. It's a single piece in 4 pieces. That's these tapestries in the back here.
So those are all printed on linen in sort of a scroll format. So these are, I was trying to, again, I was mishmashing a couple of different formats from art history, but I was very much drawn to some of the storytelling nature of a lot of the illuminated manuscripts, and also the books of hours that people would be bringing with them, which would be tiny little things actually, which were meant for like private contemplation at different times of the day, different times of the year. For this piece, and it too is an ongoing piece, it's about looking at the ecology of North America different little snapshots of the ecology, what's been happening with natural forces, but also with the human imposed forces in history, and using the raven as the narrator. So I've come back to raven is common to a lot of cultures all globally. I mean,
You said even up to Scandinavia.
oh yeah, so the Norse and Scandinavian countries, and and it's prominent in the creation story of the Kwakwaliwa, but we don't have like ownership of just it has that same spot in other creation stories for other cultures. So that's why I thought it was really appropriate and would hopefully give people an in and something to connect with, to reflect on what their own culture was and what the story is that the raven is telling about, the rise and fall of animals coming and going. And so especially when we're talking about things like bison and revitalizing the presence of bison within the North American landscape, which, in conjunction with revitalizing indigenous culture in North America as well, so two and two going hands in hand. So that's a little snippet of that. I mean, and I'm going also referencing things like before the last ice age, because I think it's really important to look at land, like especially in times like now, where faced with things like global warming and so forth, but also looking at some of the cycles that predate industrialized activity on the planet. That was a bit of a mouthful, but there you go.
But I think in order to the decision to create a kind of fairy tale format in order to cover kind of this most immense span of time, I think probably more immense than others in the show. There's a heartbreaking moment in the fairy tale when the raven and bison are talking about how animals come and go, and sometimes they stay gone, and then one day bison's gone and raven just waits. I didn't think that was going to be it, but of course now in Wanuskewin there's a reintroduction.
That's right.
Which is, I think, at the core, we kind of breezed over that as well, at the core of this entire exhibition, is this idea of the bison coming back where they belong, of
that location. And so, and with the exhibition as a whole, I mean, it's titled Okimaha because that was sort of the genesis of my experience that led to all these different ideas that I'm exploring. But there's also that one particular, which we'll get to eventually. But yeah, it's very much about beginnings and ends. And new beginnings.
Opening with the fairy tale, or as I say, the format of the fairy tale is so great because there's a really earnest moral to the story, but there's also an opening for reparations. That's the right word.
Yeah.
So, Bison Tapestries. This is a series of 3 that go together, but they are all elaborately titled in their own right. So let's just go left to right here.
So that first one is Acta Sanctorum, which is roughly translated from Latin. Not that I'm a fluent Latin speaker, but the deeds of the saints. So this piece features prominently beaver, unicorn, bison, and antelope, as well as a selection of water birds. And it's, I guess the central theme of this piece would be water and preservation. You're taking one? Sure, take one of my microphones. I know, I'm hoarding them all over here.
Sorry, we're getting some.
No, sir, there we go. Oh, no, the one she had. Oh, that's okay, we'll be right there. So we can.
I think we're going to keep talking. She would tell us if you couldn't hear us.
We'll just keep talking. So the central theme of this one is water, and looking at ideas around water preservation, water conservation, how different animals interact with water. And I've used the unicorn in this one for as a starting point, but I'll wait to see what the starting point. Everyone stay tuned to see what that starting unicorn.
Yeah, and not just any unicorn though. This is the unicorn.
Hold on, while we
Okay. I'm double clicked now, dear virtual audience.
So now everyone can hear us? Okay, so can see, that's right. Some of these unicorns are from the Hunt of the Unicorn series. That's at the Cloisters. And it's always amazing. All these things that are European treasures all end up at the Met Museum in New York.
Yum, 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 yum.
How do they
Yeah.
do that? It's either the Met or the Getty, right?
Yeah.
One of the two. It's like, you guys, you've got all the toys. Anyway, that's that particular series is at the Cloisters, and I thought that was important to use because the part of the mythology was not only the hunt of the unicorn, and the idea of hunting of a mythical animal and just how close it came for both beaver and bison to being mythical animals to being wiped off the face of the earth. So there's that correlation, and then there's also the bringing in the idea of the unicorns were supposed to be able to purify water with their horn. And both beaver and bison are really important species in conserving water. Around ideas of stability with the water table. So all of these animals are important.
They have kind of practices that they're sustainable. They don't have to move. They don't contaminate their water.
So bison don't contaminate water the same way that cattle do. Beavers, of course, important for creating reservoirs of water and clean water for other species. So they're the main characters, but I brought all these other little species that are plants and animals and birds that are depicted around that in the margins of the tapestry that are part of that system.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you had any questions.
And yes, and to the audience as well. You can even interrupt us. As you see, this is a pretty organic conversation. So we're going to return to all of these tapestries and have these very particular borders that are made hugely of native plants to Wanuskewin. Yes, so this one has specifically water plants in it.
Again, most of these, not all, but most of them were images that I shot when I was visiting Wanuskewin. I think it was back in, I'm going to say 2019. It could have been 2018. So just as I was hiking a bit the property and through Okimaha Valley, the creek, that runs behind Wanuskewin, some of those plants are tiny, tiny little plants. Some of them are really large shrubs, but they're all really important for one reason or another for the job that they have, I guess, in that ecosystem.
Yeah, well, that's that idea of ecosystems, is that everything that belongs there has work to do.
Yeah, everything's got a job.
Yeah. And I like the titling of all of your tapestries as well. Like
and I always think that of course I'm very favorable towards beavers and beaver activity, and think that it's really important that we rethink their species, that we really need to rethink our relationship to as humanity.
Yeah.
But just I guess the idea of the deeds of the saints is that saints are always persecuted. Well, generally end up persecuted for half to.
I think it's part of the job description,
which is exactly what happened to beavers. And that all their good work goes, no one says thank you. So I'm saying this my way of saying thank you.
You're a professional beaver publicist.
Yeah.
I'm going to move to the center one, which is significantly larger than the other two, to create this kind of bulge in the middle.
Yeah, so I wanted to create that as a central piece, partly because for me it was also a jumping off point for creating other pieces in the exhibition, not just the tapestry pieces. So I've long been fascinated with the work of Nicolas Poussin, who's a painter, was one of the, I guess, favorite painters of Louis XIV. Again, going back to that time, intersections between culture and the things that Louis XIV did that had an effect on his ideas of empire, as strange as they were for France, or even stranger for Canada, but the residents of that to this day, of what it's done to Indigenous communities, both people, plants, animals, everything. So going back to Nicholas, and that one group of paintings he did, and one of them had inscribed within the painting this beautiful sort of idyllic scene, and then there was a stone that had an Arcadia eagle, which has been very translated to mean various different things. One of the ones I see again and again is that even in paradise here I am, or I am here. And meaning that death is there, even in paradise, here I am. Well, I took that, even though, it's kind of grim as it is.
It's true.
And taking that, so of course, I took that and kind of juxtaposed these different characters within the Wanuskewin background. So that background is Wanuskewin. The European gentleman who was dining with his servant,
And Dougie.
and of course the dog at the.
Yeah.
I love it that all of these grand paintings have these little dogs somewhere eating bones and things on the ground. So that had to be. It's like Benson, the gallery dog here.
Yeah.
It's like we have to have our Benson in
Yeah.
there. And so he's actually that fellow is from a group of etchings that was done by Abraham Boss, who is a French artist. And he did this series of etchings on the 5 senses. So this one was from taste. And so I've taken him and plunked him onto Wanuskewin, and had a bison with his servants, which is all the little birds that are sitting on his back.
Yeah.
And so imagining this this meeting between two very different species as well in backgrounds, and then layering on, even in even paradise, here I am. So that idea that the bison is thinking about, okay, what are you doing here? And it's about these chance meetings.
Yeah. And also, in order to, you remove the dining companion of this human gentleman.
Oh, I know, he had a bunch. I just got rid of them.
And then reconstituted the servant. I think that the servant was being blocked.
I did. I kind of played mix and match with that, just so that I could focus the attention. I thought it would, by fooling, but I hope Abraham forgives me for what I did to his work.
I think that you could have done it as the bison being the fancy lady dining companion as well.
I know. It's
Man, we need you to move and make room for.
We've got another guest.
Yeah, exactly.
Here.
Yeah. And again, you can see the borders have changed, but they're still local photos that you took of your own work.
Exactly. And so this is more of a pasture land, sort of tall grass prairie species that you would see in this area. So one was the wetland. This is more the pasture.
Yeah.
So that's
Those little prairie dogs.
Mm-hmm. And those Richardson's ground squirrel.
Oh. And then finally we have the vieille connaissance.
Yeah, so this is, I thought I used that turn of phrase, acquaintances, as opposed to friends, because I thought it was more interesting to qualify the relationship between them, because they're not necessarily old friends, but they're old acquaintances. So that rock is a large glacial boulder, erratic, that's on the property of Wanuskewin, and it was so bison loved, because bison are very itchy. They always need to itch. They're very, scratchy business made of bison. And on the prairie, there's few and far between things that one can scratch one's itchy hide on. So the stones like this were very, very much used by probably not just bison, other wildlife, but especially bison.
Because they also need to remove their winter coats.
Yeah, especially when they're in between seasons.
Yeah.
So I thought that was, this hypothetical meeting between these two acquaintances that have been separated by over 100 years.
Yeah.
So I'm referencing a time, basically when bison, probably 1870s, 1880s, when they were the big extermination kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been bison since, but not in the way there was since then. So it's relatively recent. I mean, when you think of the life of that rock, puts it in perspective.
Yeah. I do. Yeah, the life of that rock is so true. And you use that idea of acquaintances instead of friends quite often. We're going to meet Coyote and Badger later, and Nathan's relationship with Bison. They're not besties. They're kind of colleagues. They're familiar faces. They're people that you run into. They're souls that you run into.
That's a very good way of speaking. Yes, phrasing it.
Yeah. What I love about I didn't know about these rubbing stones is that not only are they smooth and non-indigenous rocks, so they've been dropped by glaciers from elsewhere, which is why they're not the rest of the landscape. There's something different.
Exactly.
But that around them, the ground is depressed from centuries of hoofs also. So it looks, they're in a permanent state of, apparently, I haven't seen them. They're in a permanent state of looking like they just got tossed into the ground really hard because there's this kind of moat around them.
Yeah, from being well used.
Yeah. From the weight. Okay. So we are moving on to the final, not new triptych, but a brand new Bison Tapestry, Bison Gate.
Yeah, so this piece is considerably longer than the other ones, different format. And this one I really wanted to emphasize the idea of time in the only way that I can, by bringing in Stargate. But Dr. Ernie Walker actually was one of the people who I think was instrumental in getting Wanuskewin to being what it is today. And he's an archaeologist, and he has often talked about the land around Wanuskewin and where the bison jump is on the property and so forth. So he's been doing research on that with his students for decades now. And he's talking about that idea of windows through time and portals and stuff. So of course, I just took it that extra step as far as a portal. What is a portal? It's like the start. So I used to watch Stargate a long time ago. And if it was still on today, I probably would still on.
It's a masterpiece of a movie. I know you watched this year.
Go get on Crave TV and watch some Stargate. So and it was always SG1, and then they had that signal. So I thought, instead of Stargate, it's the Bison Gate, of course, in my world. And so then you have on the left-hand side, Dr. Walker, as well as Craig, who is the Bison group manager at Wanuskewin, releasing that's taken from when they were releasing the first bison back onto the property a couple of years ago now. So that was the bison jumping out of the trailer, but here I have them leaping out of and then going across the landscape. Yeah. So that's a panoramic shot that I took. Standing from here where that rock is, looking back, not only at Wanuskewin and the buildings, but Okimaha Creek and in the distance, the Saskatchewan River. And it's just a beautiful vantage point, and really lent itself to the consideration of time.
Yeah.
So this is why I've been bringing these types of, not only the characters of the different bison that would have inhabited the land, that are inhabiting the land now. That blonde bison lives at a game farm in Saskatoon. And I know that there's a lot of spiritual associations, especially around renewal and so forth with that. So it was important to, even though that's not from my personal Indigenous community, I recognize this is all about this land here, and it's expressing my love of this landscape too. So that was part of it.
I think that a special song last night too.
What's it? Oh yes, well, it did. That was wonderful that they. That it had it called out to other people in that way. So, and with this one, some of the border images, I've been bringing in elements of, I guess, art from the past 10,000 years from both sides of the ocean. So some of these images are from caves in the south of France. So
that's like to the left of the title piece. There.
And then the piece at the left of where it says BG1, to the left of it, that's a Saskatchewan petroglyph. On top, on either side of the skull, so that's that skull is actually of a prehistoric bison that used to live in what is now Canada.
Big one.
The big one, yeah, they're gigantic.
Yeah.
And I think they have whole skeletons of that, like in places like Drumheller at the Royal Tyrrell Museum and stuff of those. For us, would be prehistoric bison, but the life of the world is probably, no, they're not that long ago. And so, yeah, cave paintings from the south of France, petroglyphs from Canada, and interwoven with prairie species, some of which are at risk, such as the burrowing owl, the black-footed ferret. So I wanted to bring this discussion of the precariousness, the longevity of these animals, the time frame, but also the precarious nature of some of these animals.
Yeah. And I'll point out on the right side, for those of us online, we're going to be posting closer details over the course of the exhibition, so you don't have to worry that things aren't high resolution right now if you can't come in. These are just cell phone photos. But on the far right, so sorry, you might see our old friend, the unicorn again.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And this is the very famous Unicorn in Captivity.
Yes.
Which is the final tapestry, if the Met's ordering of the tapestries is to be believed. And we were joking about the flaccid containment of this unicorn. Yeah. It could escape at any moment. It's just...
Well, this one it can escape, but then the original one, and that was part and parcel of the idea, too, of unicorns, that a unicorn could only be tamed by a virgin. And so then that was the sad part of some of the hunt of the unicorn, is that how could that duplicitous virgin bring him in knowing that he was going to be killed? It's like, what? And giving him the fancy collar, and there's just such a tragedy, I think, and worldview that is embodied in some of the aspects of what is conveyed in this tapestry. But they were, I mean, I also acknowledge that they were part and parcel of a very different culture from a very different time, from hundreds of years ago. But still, I wanted to make it so that my unicorn can lead.
Okay, so here's the namesake piece of the show. This is the full length of the table. That's from the other angle. Let's start with the table, and then we'll go to our friends at the end.
Okay, so as you said, this is an 18-foot table, maple, that was all milled from the area where I live. And then I created the map of Okimaha Creek in molten glass. I worked in conjunction with some amazing glass artists, Jen and Terry Craig, who are with Artec Studios. I should probably give you some information that you can have on the website, just so that people can see some of their other work. It's so wonderful to work with other artists like that, and that's what with these artworks that I do. I personally don't do every aspect of it, but I enjoy, I design it, I create it, and then I work in conjunction with other artists on milling the wood or help pouring the glass and stuff. And that's a really enjoyable part of my job, I guess, as far as learning more about these materials. And because I don't know, can anyone artist, I guess it might be possible, have facilities for glass blowing and bronze casting and stuff. So this is part of me being part of a larger community that is really enjoyable. So we poured the glass onto the table in the general shape of the Opimihaw Creek, and having the glass was a really important part to me, conceptual, as opposed to, routering it and maybe filling it in with polyester resin or something like that, which would be in a way much tidier and cleaner. But I wanted that interaction of materials, because that is what this show is all about. The interaction between species and land and their jobs, and to have that glass physically burn itself into the maple, and all of that no, I wouldn't say mess, but all of the grittiness of that entailed was an important fact for me. And then on top of that, our plates, again, everything's supposed to have like these rough little feel to it as earth and just kind of, and showing all these, uh, again, a little taste, a sampling of the species that are in the Tallgrass Prairie ecosystem and how important the bison is. The bison, in a sense, sets the table. The bison is the engine that is driving a part of this ecosystem.
Yeah.
So that's why I have all those legs underneath. It's not supposed to look like the bison that are marching along underneath with all these species on top. So, there's places for rattlesnakes and owls. And actually, I don't know if I have an owl there. I've got like magpies and different butterflies and things like that. And then the napkins are all feature scavenger birds because that's a very important cleanup job. So I thought that would be good to have them on the napkin. So then there's vultures, seagull, pigeons, raven. And I wanted, I suppose, to acknowledge the importance and give each of them their due. I mean, of course, I could come up, and I probably, as I do, I keep making more things and more things,
Sure.
and mix and match with different species, but there could be so many things on there. So we'll see, maybe in a couple of years' time, there'll be no more room on the table. But I also wanted to leave.
Isn't that a pretty thought?
It's big.
Yeah.
But I did want to leave room so that it wasn't so packed with plates that you couldn't see the connection of the glass,
Right.
the water, the waterway that's protected.
And there's so these so I'm looking at what we can see on the screen right now. You have the unglazed earthenware,
Yes.
and this beautiful blue resin or blue porcelain.
Yes, with glaze. So there's and that goes to the ideas that I was trying to evoke about the different textures that we find in the territory here, and the smooth waters that the water environments versus the dry baked, and especially after summer like last year where it was there was a lot of drought conditions here in the prairies.
Where it kind of scales, becomes kind of scaly.
And everything, and everything's like really crumbly and dry. And so that's why I thought it was really important not to, of course, not practical if you were going to use these, but there was no other way to do that than just to leave it as unglazed and just the way it comes out of the kiln. I thought that kind of made the story better than having them all completely finished, like a setting of Prince Albert China or something like that.
Absolutely. Which would not be outside of your wheelhouse, but
No, not for this particular purpose.
Yeah. Oh, I do want to, just because it's worked for me, to put a shout out in AGSM live events that the viewers might see on the right side. There are 2 sprigs of sage tucked into the napkin there.
Oh, yes.
We did not anticipate this need, and I would love it if we could have some local Westman region sage that maybe somebody out in the interverse, maybe have harvested if you want to donate to this work of art.
Oh, that would be great. Yes, there's some local sage as along the table.
Yeah, so we have this bit from Treaty 6. It'd be nice if we had some from Treaty 2 as well. So let's skip right over our dear friends here.
Oh, our friends. Well, I had those 2, the bronze coyote and the badger. They're part of a small series that I have done, and I've taken the badger and the coyote, especially the coyote too, and put them in different situations of installations that I've had because of the different situations that these animals are found in. But this one is one of my favorite because no one ever invites the coyote or the badger to the table. So there's nothing depicting them on the table, but they show up anyway. Yeah. They're always hopeful. And the fact, I know, look at their faces. It's just sad. It's just sad. And coyotes and badgers are known to hunt cooperatively. So I know it might seem to some people as a weird juxtaposition, like why would I choose those 2 animals? But there is documentation of those animals going back decade, probably a lot longer. Probably about 50 years ago, people said, "Oh, this is just like an old Indian tale that these animals hang out." But then I think it was a university student down in California that got some of the first footage years and years and years ago. Now they have some really great trail cam footage of coyotes and badgers hanging out together, going hunting together. So the badger generally will dig out the gopher holes, and so then the gophers usually have several openings to their burrows. So as the badger is digging in to dig the gopher out, they usually go shooting out another hole, but then the coyote's waiting at the other hole for them to. But there's some hilarious pictures I've seen of like this one badger working away, just digging up a storm, and then two coyotes just standing there watching. It's like, you guys have paws, you could dig too. It's, like
the work the gopher with the
and usually they don't. That's the thing, is that the coyotes usually grab it too. So one guy's doing the work.
Yeah.
It's kind of a lopsided arrangement, but there was one footage that I had seen of there was a big culvert, and it was a night vision thing with the coyote and the badger, and the coyote is like leaping around like a puppy, like, come on, let's go. And it was, so they were taking the culvert to go somewhere and do whatever it is they're up to, and the badgers, their gait is so funny and kind of wobbling, and I guess it wasn't, and badger wasn't sure it wanted to go, and the coyote was like, let's go. And it was just their body language was hilarious. Two totally different species.
Totally different, yeah.
So I just thought that was remarkable. So all of that got rolled into these guys being in the installation.
Yeah. And I was really torn about it because they're at the back of the table. You have to walk all the way to the end of the table in order to encounter them.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, it was a game that I was playing as I designed this thing. But I had this real crisis of conscience as we started lighting. I said, maybe they should be out in the middle. No, they don't get invited. That's the point.
They don't get invited. They're there looking sad, but you just know that as soon as we're not looking, they're going to grab everything.
Okay, so transect, invitation to play.
Yes, yeah. So that again inspired. I've inspired by what's happening now with reintroduction of bison, not only at Wanuskewin, but in other areas of North America. And I've been using, I guess, the format of children's toys with several installations over the past, I don't know, probably over 10 years now. I guess not only to make the direct correlation with our playing with environment and how it is just, a game from an industrial standpoint, and it just feels so simplistic in some cases. But when you get down to the politics of it, it is simplistic. It's a lot of decisions that are made that impact not only landscape but people. Are the money is the what's the instigation or the motivation, and not a really clear analysis of what the repercussions are going to be. So that's another thing that runs through a lot of my installations, is that idea of consequences. And I'll just say that the consequences of getting on that bison, it's really dangerous, so please no one get off.
It's not going to hurt the bison, it's going to hurt you.
It'll hurt you, yeah. It'll go. But and then but it's been really enjoyable for me. Another enjoyable part of my job is to come up with these different toys. That there are no magpies. I mean, most people view magpies as a pest. But they come up with the idea that their tails are so long, they need a special little wheel to roll them along. To come up with these designs to...
and again, with this confrontation, right?
There is a confrontation, but are they inviting, or are they inviting them? Are they confronting them? Are they welcoming the bison back?
Yeah.
But I want it to be that open-ended, but also that tension that exists between the characters that are not just in this installation, but any of them really.
And transect, the title, was taken from the ecological, the researching method of taking samples along.
Exactly. So that was very much inspired by Wanuskewin and Ernie Walker as well, as the way that not only he but archaeologists the world over, how they analyze land and human activity, and so I'm just kind of bringing that sensibility into the playroom, I guess.
Yeah. Bison.
Yeah, these are wonderful photos.
It's an okay phone, but I'm not a great photographer. We'll have professional photos soon. So
I think you did a fabulous job. Thank you so much. It looks great.
We're here zooming in on the tapestries. So again, this is the same shot that we started the presentation with. This is what confronts you when you walk in to the exhibition space. So you had said this is all 536 pages of the
I think it's like 536 pages, and for a document that long, it's actually a very concise document. I would encourage people to read it. Even part of it, it states what happened, what happened, where it happened, who it happened to, and suggestions for going forward. There isn't a lot of fat on that document. I mean, I know that there's like huge other volumes that contain more details about all of this, but just as a summary, it's a really concise, publication, and I think it's really, really important. I don't know if I would say, well, it's recommended reading for a lot of people. If you want to know what's happened, this is just like almost like a little taste of what happens. The full magnitude of it, of course, can be crushing. I mean, one of the first
thing, the crushing word, nobody knows what reconciliation means, and you said this says like, what we mean by reconciliation, right? Like,
what does that mean, and how do we do it? Well, first of all, you have to know what you're dealing with. So I think that is one of the reasons. Like, to know that it exists is not enough. It's better to know detail. Unfortunately, I know perhaps too many details, because one of the first schools that's mentioned in the TRC summary is the one that my mom went to, which no longer exists. They demolished that, but that's St. Michael's, which is in Alert Bay. So I've grown up knowing about the situation. I've done a lot of artwork over the decades knowing about the situation. So this is not the first piece that I've done. And I think I mentioned to you earlier that people have asked me now that there's more awareness about residential schools, what the reaction of people was to this artwork. And over the years, and I said, actually, it was kind of, people go, oh, that's nice, but now I realize they didn't really understand or know what I was talking about. Other Native Indigenous artists, other Indigenous people in the community did, but other people that had no idea.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, what?
Yeah.
So
they weren't even as touched by it. Like they couldn't really conceive of the magnitude of it.
They did, they couldn't grab the scope of it. So that's actually something I've been thinking about, that I would like to work with someone someday to bring together all the works that I've done. The Indian and Northern, what used to be Indian and Northern Affairs, I can't keep up with the name of the departments, they change so quickly, but the Indian Art Center owns one of my early seminal installations that I did about that, and for that one I used orcas to talk about being taken away from your community, and captive orcas versus wild orcas. So I mean, not that was the same situation, but I was trying to tease out these ideas of what it means to be taken away from your home, from your family. So, and speaking of family, I mean, that's what some of the birds that I've depicted. I thought long and hard if or what I would add onto the document, because it really doesn't need to have anything added to it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, I guess, also bring about the idea of family community. So to do that, I've used the images of birds that are common clans, common clans across the country, clans that are important for strength of voice, family protection, all kinds of different attributes. But I also didn't want to privilege one Indigenous art style over another. So that's why I decided at the end of the day to show them as the actual birds instead of
forming them yourself.
instead of like the Northwest Coast version of a raven or something like that.
Right. And they're all again. I don't have details for this slideshow, but we will reveal them if you continue to follow the exhibition. They're all kind of in different. They're all doing different stuff.
Yeah.
In different moments of their day. There's the chickie who's stretching its legs. Burrowing owls, who you can see here.
Another it's like the family hanging out by their burrow.
And then this is from behind the beaver, who's an earlier bronze as well.
An earlier bronze who's been situated on a hall chair, contemplating what's in front of being presented in front of him or her. And going back to the birds too, is that I wanted to show a variety of birds, like young birds and old birds, the idea of family and youth, and that what happens with the residential school. And there's one.
They are hugely engaged. They're in sets of birds. There's
with parent birds and young birds, and then some birds squawking. And so I wanted to bring that. I thought that hopefully that would bring about the idea of family too. And beavers are actually extremely family oriented. They keep their young with them for several years, and the teenagers help to raise the young kids and stuff. So a beaver family is just amazing. That's why I wanted to bring in a beaver for this particular.
Also because of your profession as publicist for the beavers.
As publicist for the beavers, I thought the beaver had to have pride of place in there.
Yeah.
Part of my job too.
Yeah. And you said that you're originally it was built at doing a cleansing, cleaning its fur.
So this is it's sort of a contemplative pose.
Yeah.
But beavers also, they're often in this pose when they're grooming themselves because they spend a lot of time looking after their fur. So some people might think this is kind of a weird pose for a beaver to be in, but it's actually not. That's something that when I view them out my back window, because I live on the edge of a beaver pond, that's often when they're in the summertime sitting up on the dam, having a little groom session late in the afternoon.
I think that ties in so well to the corvid and the tapestries and all the different bison that you have in the long tapestry, especially, where they're all doing what they do. You haven't changed anything about them in order to give them these attributes of this kind of fictional narrative. You kind of take
what they do normally and put it up there to do some good advertising.
Yeah,
that's just what they do. And some of them do like nasty jobs, like predators. Nasty jobs.
Love those vultures. Yeah, and then because we're going to move on to the other tapestry as well, but I also wanted to point out the Beaver Sticks.
Yes, they're all beavers from the hardworking beavers at my place, so I have to give a shout out to them.
Yeah, good work. I don't think that I've ever noticed a beaver stick or seen one. Maybe I just didn't know that I was seeing one, but they look like they've been formed entirely. Like there isn't a bit of them that isn't kind of worked over.
It's completely worked over. And what that reminds me actually too, with just how fastidious they are and how they don't waste anything, because they, chewing all the bark off of these things. It also reminds me of raising silver. So my friend Lois at the Region Betteridge, who had taught me about how to raise silver in a traditional sense, where you take a flat sheet of metal and then you hammer it over different, silversmiths' anvils to create these beautiful forms. And her thing that she was always saying is like blow on blow, grow on grow, and it's that's the whole thing. In order to do it, you have to spend days and days of hammering. So that thing with the beavers and that repetition was just like the silversmith's work, and I really love that correlation of labor to that exists between species.
Yeah. We've gotten to the hour point, but I'm going to keep going until we finished our tour. That's just to say to anyone at home that there's not going to be a question period at the end. So if you do have something, just interrupt us in that comment section wherever you're tuning in from if you have something pressing, and we will address it as we continue on with the tour. Okay. So this is taken from the last installation at Wanuskewin, just so that you could get a better view of the beaver. I don't have that one, but they're not in proximity with.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that position that we were talking about of the grooming. So cute. Tapestry 2, to build a better lodge.
This piece is for me, it's a culmination of ideas that I've been having of how these ideas of reconciliation. How do we go forward? Again, you have to, in order to go forward, you have to have a knowledge of where these conflicts, where things went right and where they went wrong. And so just as the TRC was a document that I thought can help to inform the decisions we make in the future, I've been looking to the treaties and the written documents that have started, like, although they're not all depicted on here right now, but some of the early agreements, and that's exactly what they were, just agreements. They weren't treaties to sign to, carte blanche, we're giving you all this property. They were peace and friendship agreements, like the ones that were done in Nova Scotia, for example. And they were basically, the First Nation chiefs it's an agreement between the British or the French or whoever it was at the time, that there wouldn't be conflict, so that it's not that the Indigenous people were giving any real estate away. It was like, we agree not to be badgering you and killing you all the time. We're going to engage in a collegial economic trade for mutual benefit kind of thing. And if so-and-so is sometimes creating a problem or having like a challenging situation, we'll do this in a peaceful manner. So, if you look at what this day and age, we're still hammering things like that out constantly between different nations as far as free trade agreements and all that kind of thing. It was that, and how that got twisted over the years into, no, you gave us all your land. No, look at this. And when you look at the language of any of these documents, it's absolutely mind-boggling that you would think that this represented everyone's interest at the table. Of course it did. Yeah. Of course, the colonial crown, colonial government and entities were not. I would say they weren't. It wasn't in good faith, these agreements that they were coming upon. They had translators and they had all sorts of people in both communities that were trying. It wasn't that there wasn't any agreement.
You can't lose a game if you're the one writing the rules.
Yeah, that's right. So that's why I've chosen to refer to these documents in a way almost like it was important for me to look like they're almost like pieces of paper that are just flowing, that have been thrown out and are going down a water stream or something like that to be taken away. And also coming from the background of my family upbringing, my mom being First Nations, my father is not, and he used to work in the RCMP, and that's how he met my mother, because she was a nurse. And so she was one of the Native women have been nurses since the dawn of time. But there was a program back in the 50s to attract women to become registered, Indigenous women registered nurses. So she went to nursing school in Vancouver, and then when it came time for her when she graduated, she wanted to go back and work in her home community's hospital. So that they had a hospital, so that's where she did what she did. Meanwhile, my father, East Coast boy, joined the RCMP, and then RCMP are usually posted in very remote areas the first couple of years of their working life. So he was transferred to Alert Bay to be one of there's only a couple of cops at this station there, whatever it was. So the cops are always bringing people in and out of the hospital, and the nurse, right? Who else is going to have coffee on at 2 o'clock in the morning in the remote? The nurses at the hospital. So that's how Mom and Dad met. And actually, her cousin, who is also a nurse, married the other cop that was stationed in Alert Bay.
That's funny. It's like the inevitable pairing kind of thing.
And
It changes one thing, and then you'll find
your life partner. And actually, if they had been married just a few years earlier, Dad would have been kicked off the force. There was no, like, you can't be fraternizing with the Indigenous people. You would be kicked out.
The Indigenous people, not just the civilians, or
what's that?
Because of the indigeneity of them, not because they were civilians, or like.
No, just because they were Indigenous people. No, you can't. So that rule had just recently been changed. Although the rule when Mom married someone who wasn't First Nations, she lost her status, so she got a letter from Indian Affairs saying that she was no longer Indian. It's like,
right.
Just that's a whole other ball of wax. But growing up with, just to address what's here, growing up hearing the different discussions, because eventually we moved. Dad was transferred to Ottawa, so at Sunday dinner, a lot of First Nations lobbyists who Mom knew would come over because they were in Ottawa to lobby for whatever, and so they'd be over at our house for Sunday dinner. So I grew up hearing the politics of what was happening at the time, how things were trying to be hammered, and this be in the 60s and 70s. And also my mother's sister was very active with the American Indian movement at the time, so she was living in Winnipeg for many years, even though they were originally from British Columbia. But just seeing that dynamism to the discussions and the political outreach that was happening at that time really inspired me. When I was a kid, I used to do little cartoons for the Indigenous newspaper back home in the reserve and things like that. So I don't know, I've always been doing art. So this has been in my background since I was born.
Yeah.
And so this crazy assemblage is sort of a result. It's like
it is a crazy assemblage because there's the prints and there's the embroidery and there's the beading.
Just little bits and pieces, and I don't normally incorporate beadwork and like, not that this is beadwork, so but it is kind of a backdrop as far as when I was younger and Mom was teaching me how to bead and do these kind of things, and then also like the other pivotal moments in, I guess, awareness about First Nations issues, which I think for a lot of North America was when Marlon Brando rejected his Academy Award. And
we have that, yeah, that's
and so Sashi and Littlefeather sent her up, and then I love that, the expression on Roger Moore's face. He's going, "What? You're here doing what?"
Yeah.
And apparently Marlon had drafted up an 8-page manifesto that he wanted Sashi to read out, so that's what she had in her hands. But when they pushed her, when she showed up, and then they realized, oh my God, what's going on? They said something like you have 15 seconds. So she had to think on her feet and respond to that. But I think that was like, when it happened, that was major. So
it was major.
Mm-hmm.
It was major. And I'm going backwards. That's why I keep going back and forth, because I do realize that it starts here with Oka and then really pours downward. There's a big directionality to the way that these things puddle. And
they do, and I know that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't run in how these things are juxtaposed are kind of the way my brain catalogs things. Is that right. It's not necessarily in a tidy chronological order.
My computer's not plugged in. It looks plugged in. Sorry.
Oh, it went out?
No, keep going.
Okay, well, if we just go briefly back to the Oka image, I think that is another pivotal moment in journalistic history, was that photograph of what was the Mohawk warrior, but that Mohawk warrior is Bradley LaRock, who's from out west here.
Right.
But he'd gone there to support them.
Yeah.
So I thought that was, I haven't talked to Brad to see if he thought that was weird that I put that.
Well, it'd be fun if he just saw it, if he just happened upon it. So this orange photo at the top of this slide, right?
Yeah, what the one at the top there.
Yeah. And then before we move on, when we talked about this being an evolving artwork, I lost myself. So here we watched you embroider Selkirk right here.
Yeah, the Selkirk Treaty, which predated Treaty 1. Treaty 1 superseded that, and then Treaty 2 at the end there. So, and I wanted to bring those, even though this isn't the territory for the Selkirk Treaty or Treaty 1, you're very close to the border of Treaty 1.
Yeah.
So
I think it's called the Brandon Rapids border.
it's what?
I think it's called the Brandon Rapids.
Oh my goodness! Well, there you go. So I wanted to be inclusive and bring in the whole area, because I don't know if or when I'll have a chance to bring this piece back to Winnipeg, or not Winnipeg, but to Manitoba. Sorry, I had Winnipeg on the brain because of the Selkirk Treaty.
Yeah.
Is your
I am. I'm going to keep going. I just panicked with my
is
computer. It's Mercury
is
retrograde.
it about to die?
No, I was not plugged in at my computer end, and I just made a mess of things. Here we go. So you walk down Tapestry 2 and turn the corner, and you're confronted with these three fellows.
With the wolves, yes, and those were actually those are images that I took of wolves that are probably long gone. This is from back in the 90s. I was trying to document wolves and wolf research centers, because I knew that I would never be able to it would be unlikely that I would get a photograph of a wolf myself out in the wild. So most of those wolves are actually from Elie, Minnesota. I think it's Elie, or is it Eli? I think it's Elie. And so they're from a wolf research center in Minnesota. But some of them are from the Halliburton Wolf Research Center, which I have issues with them about how they deal with wolves and the ethics of how they deal with wolves. The one in Minnesota I felt was more conscientious as far as dealing with the personality of wolves and what happens with them as a group. Like if you have a captive group in a 15-acre enclosure, that's nothing compared with the territory wolf usually. And if there's any aggressions within the group, there's nowhere for the ones that are being picked on to escape.
Yeah.
So Halliburton Forest just lets them get savaged by each other, whereas Elie has the Wolf Research Center up there in Minnesota. If they have kind of like a retirement, they have different areas. So if they see this aggression happening, the older wolves, they get grouped according to ones that they get along with, as opposed to being forced to be in one enclosure.
Right.
So they have a retirement, which is everyone is entitled to a relaxing retirement, I think. So that's why but in this case, they were meant to represent the head of the household. Some of these images are the first ones that my efforts using photo programs on the computer, because I shot those this is so old school of me. Those were shot on T-Max 1000 film negatives, and then scanned and blown up. So I didn't have a digital, I don't know if digital cameras, they must have existed in the 90s, but I certainly didn't.
I don't know. But and there's because of that enlargement, there's a really kind of inky quality to them.
It's very I wouldn't say painterly, but that texture to it isn't immediately identified as a photo, because that's the T-Max grain, which is unique to T-Max film. And so I used the T-Max film for all kinds of things. Back in the 80s and the 90s, it was I just loved that grain and the sensibilities that evoked, which you wouldn't get with other type of like really fine grain film.
It's I had been living with JPEGs of these for months, and then came on Boxing Day, and I couldn't believe them. They're about 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
Frames included. They're very tall, and the frames are thick. They have depth to them. They're almost sculpted in their presence.
I needed something substantial for a substantial animal, and
the head of the house.
The head of the household, and even though it's not life size, it's pretty close to, I mean, it is the format of them.
As objects, they're so substantial. And that brings us to the allegorical wolf.
Oh, yes, Dominion, and that's actually become probably one of my most well-known works now. And it's actually just the bottom portion, which has the wolf with the text from the Book of Genesis. That's on a massive billboard in Hamilton, Ontario right now. It's part of Supercrawl, which is an arts endeavor to bring arts out into the streets. So, and it's juxtaposed with the Melissa General image in Hamilton. So it's going to be there for about another year and a half. So, and it was part of Mama's billboard project as well a couple of years ago.
Okay. Just the lower wolf?
Not the entire thing, just the lower wolf with that text. But this is the original format. And I think that working with the curators for these other billboard projects, I agree with them that in terms of a billboard, it made sense just to go with the one with the format, because that says one thing, but
the top quote is so much catchier. It's almost, it's been stuck in my head for a long time.
Yes, and that quote is, I guess the quote came from, was inspired by a jousting target that I saw. Everything seems to go back to the Met.
Yeah.
The Met Museum.
Well, they did yum, 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 yum.
The jousting, exactly, they've got everything. There's a jousting target from, I don't know, probably the 14 or 1500s, and the target has an image of an owl, and over top of the owl, it says in Latin, basically what a version of this, it says, though I am hated, so the jousting target says, though I am hated by all birds, I nevertheless rather enjoy that.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's so wonderful as far as that's what animals don't waste a lot of time worrying about things the way we do. It's like, that's the way I am.
Yeah.
That's the way I like it.
Absolutely. And this is where that sense of self, I think, we reflect on so much when you're leaving these Easter eggs, when you're making jokes, when you're combining things from disparate cultures without any kind of apology. It's that sense of self. It's not anthropomorphizing these creatures. It's trying to access
using them for what they are and being happy with them, not trying to make them into something else, because they don't need that.
Yeah,
they're wonderful the way they are, and it's all these kind of things. So yes, that kind of says it, that thing right there. And I did that work many years ago, and I guess since then been doing various iterations of that in the different formats that I've been tackling.
And I can't read the Genesis, and I certainly don't have it memorized, but it's basically the moment when humans are given control over everything.
Yes, you have dominion over everything, all the fish that swim in the sea, and everything that flies in the air, and everything that walks up the ground.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
So
this unconcerned wolf is like, oh, if you have dominion, then why do I have dominion?
Yeah, I think you got that wrong.
Yeah.
But, it's a worldview too that I think it was really important to have that there, which is in direct, I guess, the direct opposite of what I've been brought up to, not just the Indigenous side of my family, but my father's side. It's an opposition to the idea of the responsibility that you have to look after things, not that they're yours to do with as you will. It's like you have a responsibility to play your role in this, and that's from the very beginning with these ideas when they talk about stewardship.
Yeah.
I mean, there's stewardship around land, there's stewardship around our relationships with each other, and so then this is the wolf kind of walking that way.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to conclude there.
Okay, good.
Yes, thanks for staying with us for an hour and 20 minutes. I think we're right on time if you edit out the
all the
scrambling for power. Thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
And continue to follow the exhibition on Facebook and Twitter for more insights. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you so much for joining us in Brandon, Mary Anne.
Yay.
Yay. Okay. Bye,
Get rid of
Yeah.
our wealth of microphones.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Well, if nothing else, we've had a good chat.
Thanks.